Feminism is a topic some shy away from, but there's no need for that. Although feminism has been around for ages, it really became prominent in society in the early 1800s, but feminist beliefs and intentions have changed immensely over that time. The history of feminism can be broken down into three time periods, called waves. The first period began in the 1800s. In 1848, at the Seneca Falls Convention in New York, 300 women and men signed the Declaration of Sentiments, a plea for the end of discrimination against women in all spheres of society. The Seneca Falls Convention was mostly led by Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. These women represented feminism in the early 1800s and really began the modern movement of feminism. In 1920, the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution is ratified. It declares the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. In 1923, the National Woman's Party proposes constitutional amendment. Men and women shall have equal rights throughout the United States and in every place subject to its jurisdiction. Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. In 1923, women and men proposed the Equal Rights Amendment to the United States Constitution. This amendment was designed to guarantee equal rights for all citizens regardless of sex. It seeks to end the legal distinctions between men and women in terms of divorce, property, employment, and other matters. Although this amendment was proposed in 1923, it wasn't passed until 1972. The second wave began post-World War II. During World War II, most women had to replace men in their jobs because they were off fighting the war. So these women were now working in men's positions, but when the men came back from the war, the men expected the woman to go back into the home and to continue caring for the family as they did before the war. But the women didn't want to go back. They kept fighting to maintain their jobs, and many laws were passed to grant women these rights, although they were not always followed. In 1963, the Equal Pay Act is passed by Congress. This promised equal wages for equal work, regardless of the race, color, religion, or sex of the worker. During this time, many people were revolting against the government. This time was famous for hippies and the anti-war movement and anti-government. Basically, these people were fighting for peace. And during this time, feminism blended with the racism movement, anti-racism, I guess, and they also blended with gay rights and all of these things. This was known as the Civil Rights Movement. During this time, the New Left was also introduced. The New Left is basically a mindset or like a way of thinking. They were these people who were New Left. They were very untraditional, very, very anti-government, very like the epitome of hippies. In 1973, the Roe versus Wade court case declares that the Constitution protects women's right to terminate an early pregnancy, thus making abortion legal in the U.S. During the latter half of the second wave, many feminists were starting to fight and continuing to fight, I guess, for abortion rights and women's rights to their own body and how they took care of themselves. And since they thought that since it was their body, they had the right to do what they wanted to. As the second wave was ending and the third wave was beginning, more and more women were becoming part of the government and taking on governmental positions. In 2005, Hillary Clinton became the first lady to be elected to public office as a U.S. senator from New York. During this time, many more women took on governmental positions, including Nancy Pelosi, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan. These women, although it may seem not as significant to us now, living in the time that we do, even in the early 2000s, it was very important to feminists to have women representing them in governmental positions. The third wave is now what we consider feminists now. They are technically, they have all the legal rights that they have been fighting for the past 200 years. So now they are mostly fighting to break social norms. They are fighting not really legally anymore, but just socially and personally to have the same expectations or different expectations. Although it is a very, very common thing today in society for people to be feminists, and even celebrities taking on celebrity positions. I think it is very important to know the history of feminism to really understand what they're fighting for and understand where they're coming from and how they view society. So, with the three waves of feminism, it is easier to understand all these things that they are fighting for.